Our first presenters are both doctors, PhDs, Chudi Charles Nwabachili from the Department of Public and Private Law, Faculty of Law, Chukwuka Ogagama Ajaguka University, Igrabam, Anambra State, Nigeria, and Chioma Ajaguka Nwabachili from the Department of Private Law, Faculty of Law, University of Nigeria, Enugu Campus, Enugu State, Nigeria. We are delighted to have you here and honored. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. This is a joint paper with my wife, Chioma Nwabachili. This issue of conflict, before you start talking of conflict, it starts from the family. So that's why we decided to go to the family, which is the foundation of socialization. Okay, there are so many ethnic and religious influences, negative influences on the traditional African family in Nigeria, but we focus on the eastern part, Igbo community of Nigeria. So number one is the harmful widowhood practices. The harmful widowhood practices. There are a lot of things. If a man dies in Nigeria, the wife is subjected to a lot of obnoxious things. One is the issue of drinking the water. They're still doing it in some communities, which we have been educating against. Some communities, if a man dies, they will force the wife to drink the water that was used to bath the corpse. Another, they will now restrain the woman to go, the woman will not go out throughout the mourning period, and that really affects most women. Another one, we have so many, but because of want of time, we have to be brief. Even some women are subjected to sleeping on the bare floor throughout the mourning periods, and so on and so forth. There are a lot of obnoxious practices, and this is against the fundamental human rights in Nigeria and all over the international community. The second one is the forced wife inheritance. We call it in Igbo, ikuchi. If the man dies, either the brother to the husband, they will force the brother to now marry the woman. This is even against our will. Some communities in the eastern part of Nigeria still do it. And it's still against the fundamental human rights of women. The third one, we have, not families, female genital mutilation. Female, not family, female genital mutilation. According to, is a violent damage caused to the outer. Some people are subjected, they said it reduces promiscuity, which, according to, is unhealthy. Sometimes people can get HIVs and so on and so forth. We are really fighting against it, but some communities are still doing it. There are so many things, but because of want of time, I will just be brief. Problem of inheritance. We still have the issue of inheritance, that if a man dies without writing a will, it goes to the male child. This is causing a lot of problem in the community. There are some decisions, the court decisions, that say that everything should be divided equally, both men. But in practice, some communities are still going against the decision. Even the Supreme Court made some decisions in respect of that. We also have the gender discrimination. We are still dealing with if you have girls, only girls, they regard the woman that the woman is not really a proper woman, let me say. But if he now gives birth to a male child, they will say, yes, you have really arrived, that you are now the real wife of the family. So there are so many discrimination which we are still fighting against in our community. We have the polygamy crisis. Polygamy crisis. Igbo men who are married under Igbo native law reserve the right to marry as many wives as they desire. But sometimes this causes a lot of problem in the community because of issue of sharing and so on. This one is the first wife, the second wife, and so on and so forth. So some of these things is causing a very, very big problem. Another one is early marriage. Some people are still subjected to marry, even when they are young, they are not matured, and this gives rise to a lot of problem in the community or in the family, from there to the community. High cost of burial ceremony. We have a high cost of burial ceremony. Yes, marriage, go up, down. High. No, go. First, okay. The high cost of burial ceremony. You have passed it. Yes, yeah, in Nigeria, in the eastern part of where I came from, the cost of burial is always very, very high. First of all, there's what we call, you have to announce, call the in-laws, the family members, and so on. You have to cook and do all that thing just to announce. They are aware that the person has died, but you have to still invite them. All these things are costing a lot of, even the burial proper. You have to do a lot of things, our culture, in as much as it's, but it's very, very, very expensive. We have been educating against all those, but still, it's still happening. Also, influences of extended family. Yes, the influence of extended family. Yes, African families is characterized by the extended nature of the family. Members of the family owe each other. So if you are very rich, you owe a duty to help. Whether you like it or not, you still help. If any member is not really buoyant, you have the duty or obliged to help that person. So this thing is really causing a lot of problems, subjecting people to unnecessary acrimony. Another one is less regard to traditional marriage. Less regard to traditional marriage. We have less regard for traditional marriage. Yes, I've gotten it. Yes, it's okay, yeah. Yes, in Igbo land, in as much as we still do a lot of things, a lot of family, this thing, if you have not done the church marriage, you still have not started. And this is causing a lot of problem in our culture, because most people, once they do traditional, they see it as a prelude to go and do the church marriage. And it's really causing a lot of, it's making the whole thing to be very, very costly. After that, you still go spend a lot of money in the customary marriage, and you still go to do the church marriage. Another one is high cost of marriage ceremony. High cost of marriage ceremony. We do a lot of things in marriage. You are expected to buy as many things as possible, like tubers of yam, 50 tubers of yam, kola nuts, and also, so they don't even want to know whether you are buoyant enough. They will just give you a list on what to buy because you want to marry their daughter. They will give you a lot of lists, and this has really caused a problem that eventually, if you do it, if the woman now comes in, you start using that, you start beating the woman and other things. See, I spent a lot of money marrying you and so on and so forth. So it's causing a lot of problem. The last one we mentioned is forced marriage. Forced marriage. So people are forced to marry because of one thing or the other. Either that you have become of age of poverty, they will now force you to marry somebody against that person's wish. So I think all these things are what we intend to, that this is the conflict that we see in the family as a result of the ethnic, that's the negative influences of the ethnic and religious influences Nigeria. Okay, we have some recommendations, the way forward, some recommendations. One is the legislative intervention. The legislative intervention. Law is an instrument of social change. So we urge the traditional rulers that they should raise bills to our legislature and policymakers to effect this much desired changes in the ethnic and religious laws against these ethnic and religious practices. The role of religious leaders. Our leaders have a lot of role to play in this thing, and they have to tell the congregation that all these acts are so obnoxious that they should stop it. Another one is the role of lawyers and judges. The traditional rulers and indigenous should encourage their subjects to bring cases to court through the lawyers to stop all these practices, these obnoxious practices. We have the role of education. The role of education. You know, education it helps, because lack of education makes people to do some of these things. They always believe that this is the right thing. So the traditional that should sensitize the public to go to school. So they will be enlightened, sensitize the people on their rights. So you cannot subject a woman because the husband died, you subject those to show that she was not responsible for the death of the husband. The role of media. So the traditional rulers and the indigenous leaders should create awareness of these obnoxious practices with a view of eliminating them. We also have reorientation of the force, the Nigerian police. The Nigerian police still have a long way to go. They should sensitize the public. They should provide seminars. Even the traditional leaders should organize seminars so that they call the police people and tell their subjects on the implication of some of these acts they do. So I believe this, I think, because of want of time, I just summarized. There are a lot of things. But as a result of I believe that when all these things are done, the traditional rulers and dealers have a major role to play because they are nearer to the grassroots. So once they bring their subjects, they sensitize them on the need to stop all these practices. I believe that this issue of this thing will stop, and not just in Nigeria, in other places where they do, in African countries where they do it. Thank you very much. Yes.
Yes, and I believe, Doctor, if we may field just one or two questions, please, Madam.
Thank you very much. Dr. Grace Umezurike from Nigeria. First of all, I want to point out about the harmful widowhood practices you talked about, drinking the water and subjecting the woman to sleep on a bed floor and all that. And I am from I'm from Igbo extraction too, and I want to point out that these practices is no more it's no more practiced again. It was done in the olden days, even though history still reminds us of it, but I don't think it's done in any part of Igbo land now because people have realized the harm it does to the health of the woman. Then secondly, you've done a very good highlight of all these practices and all the influences religion and ethnicity has on a family. And going by your topic, a legal critic, I expected to hear the legal implications of all these things you outlined, but maybe, I don't know, maybe I didn't listen well to get it, but yes. I didn't get any legal critique of it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Let me.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Doctor.
Yeah.
I picked interest when you talked about the challenge of extended family business in the African style, and your presentation was like you had bias on it. Let me give an example. If you are living in a family, you're my brother, she's my sister, he's our brother, and you happen to have been the only educated person in the family and the one with enough money to live, yourself and probably us. Would you think it would be bad if you called me and her and this one here to stay with you? That's all about extension of the family.
Yes, sir. No, I will respond.
Thank you so much. Abdul Nasser from Syria. You mentioned to the female genital mutilation.
Yes.
So do you mean that circumcision?
Yes.
Female circumcision?
Yes.
If yes, to how much extent the percentage of female nowadays underwent to circumcision in your country? Thank you.
Let me answer.
I think my question is in addition to what Musa just asked you. Thank you for your insightful, presentation, and I did enjoy it while sitting at the back here. In order to avoid wholesale kind of rejection of African traditional practices, and if I connect the idea with what Professor Enex said in the morning in his keynote speech, he did mention of Sankofa, looking back and picking up something valuable that we've left behind. We cannot say that African extended system is totally wrong. So what would you say about Musa's question that he just asked you? Thank you.
Okay, I think yes, I can answer. Okay, I think I will start with the, I don't know whether you want to, you want to answer? Okay, I will start with the first.
Let me contribute for first.
The
Foremost,
okay,
yes.
the first, okay.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. In response to what Dr. Grace Mezuke said, coming from Igbo extraction, the practices with regard to harmful widowhood practices is no longer attainable in Igbo extraction. And I disagree with her that even though, yes, it is no longer attainable, but the paper reads, because if you have not had the privilege of reading the whole work, you won't be able to decide where the points are raised. If there is basic mere suspicion, in my area, for example, we are Igbos, but we do not come from the same area. He came from a different community, I came from a different community, but all in Anambra State. But I said, if there is a mere suspicion that there is a likelihood that a woman killed the husband, that's mere suspicion. It hasn't been proved legally, but there's a likelihood, or they suspect she's the one that actually killed the husband. The thing is for her to avail herself or prove her innocence, she will have to sleep on the same room with the husband. Again, she will have to, after the husband had been birthed, she will have to drink the water which was derived, the water they used to birth the corpse. These are all in efforts to prove that she was innocent. She wasn't the actual killer of the husband. And I said that those allegations need not to be proved. Those allegations need not to be attainable. But on mere suspicions, she's subjected to such practices. And again, when she said, looking at the work, we also, that she didn't see the legal critique of the work. And I said, because she has not had the privilege of reading the entire work or seeing the mimeograph before this time, and that's where the organizer of the conference would have felt. And I said, if she had had the privilege of looking at the entire work, each of the points were criticized legally. We argued, even though this is a practice obtainable in our extraction, but these things, are they allowed? And we even criticized, based on the Nigerian provisions of the Nigerian constitutions, that these practices are not recognized. That even though, yes, most of these practices are been declared repugnant to natural justice, equity, and good conscience, but they're still practicable. They're still practiced in those communities, even when it has been proved otherwise by the court. Yes. It's been practiced. For example, when it has to do with the issue of inheritance, before this time, under the Igbo extraction, even though some few parts of the Igbos have a matrilineal form of inheritance, but basically, in the Igbo extraction, we have a primogeniture as a way of inheritance. It's a system whereby the male surviving children of the deceased will have to inherit the deceased property. Basically, if the man dies intestate, he dies without a will, the male surviving children will have to inherit all the properties of the deceased. But recently, in a few years now, dating from 4 years ago, the Supreme Court of Nigeria, which is the highest court of Nigeria, have criticized those decisions. I said, these decisions are repugnant to natural justice, equity, and good conscience in Ukeje and Ukeje and Ekwe and Weke. These are recent judgments of the Supreme Court. To that extent, so people are aware that families where in a community or in a family where the man and the woman or the man has died intestate, that it's no longer the issue of the male surviving children inheriting. But in that case, it could be cut across all the surviving children of the deceased, whether male or female. In that case, they will have to have equal shares to deceased property, be it male or female children. But even where the Supreme Court, which is the highest court of Nigeria, have given such decisions, but in most communities, in most families, that's the prevalent situation. Even in my family, that's still the prevalent situation. And I said, unto those are canvassed in court and judgment given in that regard, that remains the prevalent situation in such cases. Thank you.
Okay. In addition to what she said, if you read the entire paper, each point is against, like, issue of restricting the woman when the man dies is against the fundamental human rights section 41 and 42 of the Nigerian Constitution. You understand? Yes, it amounts to false imprisonment and so on and so on. So if you read the entire work, you will see that I criticize each point legally, and I gave authorities where it is in the constitutions and even the international treaties and so on. So I think that's also. Yes, the second one, the issue of extended family. Yes, I'm not saying that extended family is not a good, but what I'm saying is that if you are rich, but you have a lot of responsibility, and your relation now says, okay, give me this. Today you give the person, let's say, 5,000 naira as we use. Another day he will come again. Before you know it, he will, if you refuse to give him, he will start planning some things against you. You understand? In the family, before you know it, the crisis will start in the family. I think that's what the area we are going to. That sometimes, yes, in as much as extended family, we practice extended family, but these are the negative influences of extended. Unlike in the Western world, where it's strictly nuclear family, nobody knows, you don't have that such conflict. I think that's the area.
So, in addition to what he has said, based on your question, that he appears that he leans in favor of not helping extended relations. Yes. And you asked a question and said, if suppose you are the only educated member of your extended family and you happen to be wealthy, and in that case, will in your conscience not help your less privileged relatives? And I said, in that regard, whether you want to help or you don't want to help, is basically your obligation to your extended relations are merely moral obligation.
Yes.
It's not a legal obligation.
It's not a legal obligation.
It's a moral obligation which you are not binded to help. We are not binded. The worst the person can do is that, yes, we have a wealthy relative, but he's not helping us. It's a moral obligation. It's not a legal obligation. Your legal obligation is basically to your nuclear family, your immediate family, your wife and your kids. You understand? And when you don't help them, and in the divorce of dissolution of marriage, she can get alimony from the court. But in this regard, your mere failure to help your relative, or even when you have the resources, is a moral obligation and it's not enforceable. So in that case, if you act in good conscience, you can help. But when you don't act in good conscience, yes, you will not still help. And again, when you start helping and maybe you do not fulfill your obligations later ways, it causes a lot of problem. Because in that case, the whole family will not be dependent on that wealthy member of the family, which is not really good. For example, if in such regard, you were able to train your relatives in Harvard University when you're wealthy, and eventually, when you are ready to train your own children, you can't train them because you don't have the resources. So what you are saying is that in such situations, when it causes problem, and when we have also know that, yes, you don't have such obligation towards them, which are not enforceable, that in as much as it's good to help, but it's not irregularly enforceable that you must help them. And when you refuse to help, it causes a lot of problems. To avoid such problems, every man is entitled to take care of his immediate family, yes, and not extended family. Thank you. Family.
It's not that we are discouraging extended family, but we are saying that this, because of the influence, the negative influence is having because of the extended nature of the family. I think that's the area. Yes,
I think there was a question. I think
there was a question. Circumcision. Is it the rate?
Yeah. What rate, the ratio of circumcision?
Oh, the ratio, I think it has reduced over the years, or the past few years, that about some communities, which I know, especially in Imo, there's a community I know that they're still even in Anambra, they're still doing it. So I think it should be, let's say, less than 10%. 10%, yes, less than 10%, but some communities are still doing it.
I just kind of guess, because I know the law does not recognize it, though.
Yes.
Thanks for your insightful presentation. I think you definitely raised quite a good number of issues here, and I think some of the questions kind of revealed some of the challenges, right? In terms of at what point, to the extent that we still value indigenous practices and beliefs, hold them and support them, versus when the formal court system says otherwise. What I want you to also think critically about is the abuses of the customary or indigenous traditional systems. There is the Igbo proverb that when a bad habit persists for a year, it becomes the tradition, okay? Yes. When a bad habit persists for a year, it becomes a tradition. But it's still a bad habit.
Yes.
until something happens and people kind of go back and really understand that it was really the source of bad habit. So that's the point I really want you to kind of think about. The issue, for example, of polygamy that you raised. We need to be very careful to not look at it from a westernized point of view. And appraise it for, again, in terms of issues of consent and people knowingly, willingly enter into such relationships, and what are some of the functionalities of such systems, what seem to be driving some of those practices to some extent. So again, let's be careful when we look at appraise the traditional or indigenous system, look at what the value that it is are trying to uphold, appraise it in terms of any dangers or harm that it may be causing, versus looking at it in terms of purely from the rule of repugnancy and and lack of modernity to some extent.
Yes. Okay, I think I'm not saying, if you read the paper, we are not, even this polygamy, I'm not saying and criticize, we are just saying the crisis it creates in the family. I think where you are going to look at, to view the whole thing. Well, I'm not saying that we are not criticizing the polygamy aspect of what we are saying, that some of these things brings crisis. I think that's the major thing, and sometimes they go against the law in some of the things they do. That's the effect of those crises. I think that's what we... It's not that we are criticizing some of these things.
Doctor, thank you so much. Appreciate it very much. And again, ladies and gentlemen, we're deeply appreciative for your joint presentation. And once again, we see the historic, deeply rooted tension between practices and protocols, international norms, indigenous practices, and remember always the tension to legislate morality. What one person's morality practice might be repugnant to another. So we thank you again so much.